My name is John Edmonds. I'm alcoholic.
Hey, John.
Thank you, Will, for introduction. And Cliff, thanks for... Can you hear me in the back? We're good? We're good. Cliff, thanks for asking us out. I know you didn't do any really work to make this happen. You were just the idea guy. I know. Am I done? The quickest hook I've ever had. I swallow him. There we go.
You want me to just stand on it?
How's that?
Look at that.
My name is John Edmonds. I'm alcoholic. Somebody left their big book up here. Very grateful to be here. And I recognize that Cliff was the idea guy and not really the worker guy, because I'm that guy in my group. I think of bright ideas and then hope somebody else does them. My home group is the 164 group, Frederick, Maryland. A couple people thought we were from Montana, New Hampshire. Last year we got to speak at a conference, and Maryland is MD, and somebody said, "You're a doctor." I said, no. But I do like to play doctor. So that did not take long. 1 minute in, she's shaking her head at me. It's funny, we got up really early this morning, and I didn't know OKC was that big of a destination place, because every person we've talked to, they said, "You ever been here before?" And we said no, and they're like, "What do you mean you never been to OKC?" I was like, "What?" Like the Paris of the Midwest. Sorry. But we had it's really been just a great day so far. Normally when we travel a little bit, there's always a little, I don't want to say fighting, but a little tension sometimes the day before, the day of, and we've skipped that so far, so that's exciting. We, flying to Dallas, we watched 3 hours of the Fixer Upper show, on the HGTV network. And telling Lori at dinner, I think this flight cost us a couple $100,000 because we're about to renovate our house now. That was not a part of the plan. But I was watching that show, and everybody's seen that, right? I mean, it's like this, super cute couple, and they're perfect little kids, and they I guess they're just millionaires, and they just fix up other people's houses, and they bring in another little cute couple that have, tons of money, and like, "Oh, we only have, $1 million for this renovation, so let's, I'd love to see like an AA version of that, right? Like, like a new AA couple. There's nothing like an AA couple, it's just like maybe a year dating, maybe, a year and a day sober or something like that, and a fight happened on TV, and she rolls his eyes at him, and he, says something he regrets. It's never happened in our life, but I mean, I can envision that happening. But no, it was a great flight, and it's funny, we were on the flight, and this gentleman was talking with Renee, and he said, "Where y'all going?" And she says, "OKC," and he said, "What are you doing there?" And she said, "Oh, we're visiting with friends." And I got to thinking about it. It's just amazing, what we get to do. It's like, I really wanted to explain to the guy, well, we're, getting off this plane, and people are picking us up we've never met. We don't really know who they are, and they're driving us somewhere we've never been, and an hour later, some other people that we've never met are going to pick us up, and they're going to take us to dinner with 14 people we've never met before, but we're going to have an awesome time tonight. And the guy would have been, so. I love coming to these things, and I love going to different areas and just being a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's certainly fun to run my mouth for a little while and a lot tomorrow, but it's really something we get to do. Alcoholics Anonymous is just incredible to me. Wherever you go in this country, I mean, I've never been anywhere else, internationally, but the language of the heart does not change. I met Paul last year in Arkansas. We were playing golf, and I don't know how that happened, but they played golf in Arkansas. But, it was an AA deal. We went and we had a great time and became fast friends, and it was the language of the heart. It wasn't golf. It was just awesome AA stuff. And I met Cliff this last October. He came to Maryland to speak in our area, but we'd been talking on the phone for a couple of years. We met on this online chat site and been dating ever since. And it's actually kind of weird how it happened. I called my friend in Florida, and Cliff was in the car, and we just started yucking it up, and we just kept talking and talking and talking. And after about a year, I said, Cliff, you're the best friend I've ever had that I haven't met yet. But it was just the language of the heart. We spoke the same language, and then we said, let's talk every Sunday at a certain time. We picked a time and we put it on our calendars, and we did it. We did it one time. Follow through is not my strong suit. We get told that our job is to get up here and tell you, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Or I really think the better instruction for our job from the podium or anywhere in Alcoholics Anonymous is on page 29, and that says something like, furthermore, in the personal stories, each man describes how he developed his relationship with God. And I hope certainly by the end of the weekend, but certainly some tonight, you can see how that's happened in my life. My sobriety date is July 5th, 1989. I got sober very young. If you're trying to do the math, I darkened the door of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 16. Didn't stay, but my sobriety date, I was 17, almost 18 years old. And I'll tell you, that was a couple years too late. If you guys had carried the message into my kindergarten class, I would have had my hand up with a burning desire. I was dying already. Do you guys do that in Oklahoma, burning desires? That seems to be like a therapeutic thing on the East Coast. Like at the 3 minutes left in the meeting, they say, anybody have a burning desire? Then somebody puts their hand up and throws the ball over the meeting, and then we, kind of nurse them back to health. But I say that because I never had any recollection of being happy, joyous, and free as a kid. I was just, like the book talks about, restless, irritable, and discontent from the very beginning. I had this spiritual malady that told me I was not okay, no matter what, and it was always looking forward to something else, a different event, whatever it was, and it never measured up. She never measured up. The Christmas presents never measured up. The accolades at school never measured up, and not that I really had many of those, but I'd be good for a couple of weeks in school, and my mom would be so impressed, and then as soon as they stopped giving me too much credit for things I should have been doing anyways, then I stopped doing them. Just typical alcoholic stuff. And I grew up in a regular suburban home. I say that, it's a couple, 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. My dad's an alcoholic. My mom's a typical Al-Anon, untreated Al-Anon. And I'm the youngest of 4 kids. And so by the time I got to be 10, 11, 12 years old, my parents were just done raising kids. My dad was dying of this disease. My mom was dying trying to put food on the table. My dad owned a couple bars, so no money came home, and she pretty much supported us. But none of that certainly makes me an alcoholic. And that spiritual malady I described of not being okay doesn't make me an alcoholic either. Many people go through the whole life not feeling okay in their own skin, and they do other things. They lift weights really well, or they make a lot of money, and find other outside things to fill that void. Not me. I got introduced to alcohol, thank God, at around 11 years old. Like I said, I was the youngest of 4 kids. My oldest sister, Dana, was getting married, and the magic happened for me that day. My Uncle George gave me a couple drinks that turned into about 20 glasses of champagne. And the very first time I put alcohol in my system intentionally, I have memories as a kid of going around after, like in the morning, after my parents had some type of party and drinking from the cans that were laying around, but that really wasn't. That was just more curious. But when my Uncle George gave me those 2 glasses of champagne, and for the first time in my life, something was different, the magic happened. And that very first time I drank until I got drunk, I blacked out, I threw up all over the place, I pissed myself, I made a complete ass of myself, I practically ruined the wedding, and that's how I drank every single time, right? Like our book talks about, the alcoholic is almost always insanely drunk, and I was almost always insanely drunk. If I wasn't insanely drunk, it was an accident. And I was very fortunate that my old man owned these bars, and he'd open a bar and he'd go bankrupt because of his unmanageability, and a bunch of alcohol would come home from that bar, and he'd open another bar, and just the vicious cycle. And consequently, I was very popular in school. It just was, and I loved it. You know, I loved the feeling produced by alcohol. You know, it was funny that day of my sister's wedding. It was like, you know, some people talk about, you know, feeling 10 foot tall and bulletproof and a better dancer and all. You know, I was 11 or 12 years old. None of that computed to me. But what happened, and I've never found a great way of really describing it, but I don't know how things are here in Oklahoma, but in Washington, D.C., politics is like a blood sport. In this last election season, it was out of control, especially in Washington, D.C. And it doesn't matter what your politics are, but when you turn on one of the stations in Washington, D.C., or any news, you know, Fox or CNN, you know, they put 4 people up there, all from, you know, different sides, different opinions, and they're all talking over each other. They're all screaming a little bit. They're all trying to make their point. And that's what went on in my brain. You know, there was this committee of 4 to 6 to 8, depending. And when I drank that first time, like, that just stopped. It got really quiet, you know, and I don't have any memory before then of that quiet happening in my brain. You know, you're not good looking enough. You're not fast enough. You know, I was always just, as a kid, just mediocre. I got some height, so they gave me many opportunities on the basketball court. I was always the tallest kid in my class, but I was always like the 6th best basketball player. That doesn't do you very much, you know, in sports. You know, I was always maybe the 10th best baseball player. You know, it's just mediocre. You know, they'd play me half the time. You know, and if I couldn't be the best, I really wasn't interested. You know, if I couldn't be, you know, the king of the show, I wasn't interested. So it didn't take long for me to find, you know, the crowd in school that was the loser crowd, right? I mean, they're not hard to find, and I soon, you know, became my mission to be the king of the losers, and it didn't take long. You know, but that, I remember, I tell this a lot from the podium because I remember very specifically the day after that wedding, one of the relatives had this brunch thing for my sister and her new husband before they left. And the conversation became about my behavior the night before. And, you know, my brother, who was 8 years older, was yucking it up. You know, he thought it was hilarious. And my sister didn't think it was very funny, but my dad thought it was awesome because, you know, he wasn't getting in trouble for the first time. And I had this old battle axe of an aunt. Her name was Aunt Martha. She comes and goes from my resentment list. She's been off for a while now. She's been dead 10 years, but she hasn't been off the list that long. I can't wait to tell you about that resentment tomorrow. I might tell you tonight. But she says, conversations about my behavior, and she says, I bet he'll never do that again. And I remember thinking and feeling in my soul, oh no, I can't wait to do that again. Right? Like, you all want to go right now? Like, let's go let's go throw up in the closet. Let's go do it. And, you know, every time I drank, that was the mission. And like I said, I was very fortunate that I never had to go to the liquor store and pay some old guy like Cliff, you know, buy me a bottle, here's $20. You know, I didn't have to do that. I just went downstairs in the basement and got what I wanted. And it didn't take long until that wasn't enough. You know, my alcohol use led to other accessories, and I joined the Young Entrepreneur Club of Marijuana Sales in Montgomery County, and I was a charter member, and I was just delusional. I was like a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid. My life completely unmanageable. I mean, every job I had, I got fired from stealing. I mean, I had this overall sense of entitlement that, like, I don't know where it came from. You know, we weren't a wealthy family by any means. My parents didn't spoil me. I mean, they were good to me for sure. But, like, I wasn't spoiled. I just had this feeling like the world owed me something. And when I had a job, I'd make my way over to the cash register at some point or another, and I just took what I wanted. I didn't care. Like, you know, at a very early age, before I got into drugs and alcohol severely, you know, I learned that G.I. Joe crawl across the floor when my old man's in the bed so he can't see me, you know, get into his wallet and just take what I want. You know, I had such resentment and hatred for my old man, I justified the worst of behavior, and talk some more about that later. You know, it just craziness. But the drugs really put me on a downward spiral. It just, you know, it microwaved my disease. It got me here faster. That's the best way to describe it. It's like adding water to a chia pet. You know, it just exploded. They had this, in my high school, they had this program called OJT, on-the-job training. And if you were a second semester junior or a senior, It was for like little drunks and junkies. If you couldn't make it through a full day of school, you could go to half the day of school and then go like flip burgers half the day, and they would give you credit. A couple of guys back there nod their heads. I've seen you, some alumni. And JT. And I was so sick, and I mean this sick already, I could not make it through a full day of school that I convinced them in the second semester of my freshman year that I had to go to this program. And they said no, and I said, well, then I'm done. Like I just played chicken with them. And we sat there until they gave it to me. You know, I could not come to school because, you know, I'd come to class and about an hour or two later, some guy like, you know, Wade over there would come up to me and say, hey, I got a bottle or I got a bag, let's go. I'd say, screw it, let's go. I mean, there was no thought of tomorrow. There was no thought of tomorrow afternoon. It was just, let me fix this restless, irritable, and discontent. But like I said, having that restless, irritable, and discontent by itself does not make me an alcoholic. Unfortunately, that was coupled with the allergy to alcohol. Right? I had 2 and it was 20. I never went out to catch a buzz. Never. You know, and it wasn't that my life was so terrible that like I was trying to, you know, block these terrible things that happened to me as a kid. I mean, things were rough. My old man was abusive, drunk. Yeah, sure. But it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't drinking those memories away. It was just this feeling of not being okay. And that being coupled with the allergy, I was just done. I was done from the very beginning. So it didn't take long for me to, you know, not even come for those couple classes I had to go to. And I'd wind up in the principal's office and the judge's office. Didn't matter who it was. It was always the same conversation. They'd be like, John, we've seen your test scores. You have such potential. You know, your sister went here. She's in college now. You come from a good family. As soon as they said that, I was like, okay, you obviously don't know what you're talking about. Have you been at my house? And they'd say, you know, why do you do these things? You know, why do you, whoever it was, you know, why do you steal from us? Why do you lie to us? Why do you cheat from us? You know, why can't you come to class? And I gave them the best 3-word answer I got. You know, I look at my shoes as long as humanly possible, and I give it to them. I don't know. And I didn't. I had no idea that I was already under lash alcoholism, that I was so powerless that, you know, no matter what the consequences were, I couldn't turn it down. It didn't matter. This principal had called me in. I don't remember any of my teachers' names from any grades ever, but this one principal, Vice Principal Chalkley, called me in and he said, listen, you have already exceeded the state of Maryland's unexcused absences. You cannot miss any more classes. You're in night school and summer school every year. Do you want to go to night school and summer school this year? No, I don't want to go. He says, if you can come the next 11 days, we will pass you. Just show up. I'm in. And like I said, somebody shows up in the morning. Hey, you want to go? And you know what my brain says? Summer school's not that bad. I mean, there's drugs there, right? I mean, that's where the fun happens. I mean, there's no good kids in summer school, in night school, right? Like, I mean, maybe a couple kids being, you know, superstars that are like English second language kids trying to, you know, catch up and stuff. But so need to get sober soon. So I'm in night school. It's November of 1988, and I was already the black sheep of the school. I didn't have any friends. I already been arrested a bunch of times. I got this really bad stretch of bad breaks and misunderstandings. I got arrested 3 times by the same cop with the same buddy on the same street in the same car within the drugs in the same spot within like a 3-week period of time. And this is funny now, but 27 years ago wasn't and I believed it in my core that this cop who arrested me, who was African American, I knew it in my core he was reverse racial profiling me. I mean, I believed that I could have passed a lie detector test, that he had pulled us over because, you know, in his mind we were rich white kids and he was jealous. Like, seriously, FBI put me on it? Yes, that's what happened. This guy pulled, you know. I could not envision that the reason he pulled us over was that we were in a 1978 Datsun B510, had a green hood, yellow door, you could see through the floorboard, 40 Grateful Dead stickers on the back, and smoke trailing on the side like Cheech and Chong's driving it, right? I mean, the guy pulls us over, we can barely open our eyes. You know, and I'm like thinking like, oh, you know, he didn't have probable cause. I believe that stuff, you know, and so things were not going good for me. Nobody would get in the car with me anymore. You know, people wouldn't let me in their house because I would, you know, be in their medicine cabinet or in their mother's drawer looking for, you know, money or jewelry or whatever. And, you know, I was just a pathetic human being. I mean, I was the person you were not allowed to hang out with in my neighborhood. My high school years were a lot like people's college years. I just got there faster. You know, but in my mind, I was so delusional. You know, back then, Miami Vice was a big TV show, you know, about the cops chasing these drug runners. And like, I was convinced like that was me, man. Like the cops were after me, and I was just this pathetic loser. I mean, I really was. I mean, I just delusional. And so they threw me out of high school, and I'm in night school. They hadn't thrown me out yet. I'm in night school, November of 1988, and we're in this computer lab. Remember back in the day when the computer screens were like that deep, and all you had was a green blinking square? Tough to stay sober through that whole class. And so I'm sitting in this class, I'm blitzed in my mind. There's about 30 people in the room. Everyone's in front of a computer screen. And my Ebby shows up. Didn't have a relationship with this guy, not in that sense of Ebby and Bill. But the guy tried to 12-step me. He looks at me, and we're smoking cigarettes during the break. And he says, hey, man, after the class, would you like to go to a meeting with me? Go to an AA meeting. And mind you, he did not ask anybody else in that class of 25 people, right? He was not arranging a field trip. I mean, it was just either my attitude or my aroma. Something caused this guy to 12-step me. And I called my mom up, and I was at this point, I was on the Potomac version of house arrest. This was back before we had those cool ankle things. And I said, hey, I just know she's not going to buy this lie, right? I'm going to go to an AA meeting. And I said, hey, this guy wants to take me to an AA meeting. What do you think? She said, please go. Click. What's her problem? Tired of bailing me out of jail. And so I went to my very first AA meeting. It was a Rockville Metro. It was a AA club. I don't know if you guys have any AA clubs around here, but where we live, the AA clubs are a little wild. The best description I've ever heard of it was like the bar scene of Star Wars. It was a 10:30 candlelight meeting. The lights were off. There was a disco ball that was turning. The smoke was so thick, you had to count the tiles to find your chair again. I mean, it was late 80s, Alcoholics Anonymous. Every walk of life was in this room. Bikers, bankers, hookers, lawyers, gangsters. Chewbacca was in the corner nodding out, you know. Princess I Want to Lay You was in the front, you know, looking for a victim, looking for a newcomer. And, you know, I wish I could tell you I stayed sober from that point, but I didn't. A couple things I didn't quite grasp, one of which was sponsorship. I thought I had to find like a financial backer. Like, you know, the McDonald's was the Olympic sponsor of the gymnastics team. You know, at this point, my grandmother would not give me 25 cents. You know, I walked in the room and she clutched her purse. And the other thing was, after a couple of days, I found out you guys were talking about complete abstinence. I thought sober was a couple drinks, couple hits, like you're still, you know, with it, you know, still sober. And when I found out it was complete abstinence, I rolled out. But it didn't take long for the stuff to keep hitting the fan. And March of 1989, my school expelled me for selling drugs to the security guards. And they called me in. They said, listen, you're just not welcome here anymore. And I was like, no, I'm going to come back next year and finish my senior year with my friends. And they're like, we've talked to everybody. You have no friends. Like that was the state of my life. And I wound up in front of the judge. My mom had emptied what little money I had in my college account that somebody had set up for me and got me a lawyer. They put all my cases together and wound up in front of the judge. And he said, you can go to juvie jail. It was called the Mark Twain Reformatory School. I knew nobody was being reformed there. Or you can go to this other program. It's called the Phoenix program. It's a state-of-the-art, just started, the first one in the country. It's a recovery high school for little drunks and little junkies like yourself. And if you finish, you can get a diploma or whatever. And so you can go there or juvie jail. And I agreed to go. I would have agreed to go anywhere at that point. It didn't start until July. I just leave me alone today was the battle cry. Just let me just leave me alone, which of course, I really didn't want anybody to do, but it felt good to say that to people. I was that guy, leave me alone type of deal, where are you going? Like, can't you see I'm dying here? And in the next couple of months, I just hit even a more pathetic bottom. I wish I could tell you some incredible details. There was some white light experience that didn't happen. I walked into treatment center July 5th, 1989 with zero desire to stay sober. I was getting over one more time. I was just on the cusp of turning 18 years old, and I knew just as soon as I turned 18, the magic would happen. Then I could get everything I needed that would make my life whole. I could get my own place, get my own car, that type of deal. The Holy Trinity we all want when we first get sober. A car, license, insurance that goes with the car, getting those, you get one of those, but two of those, but you get all three of those, you got something going, early in recovery. Early in recovery, I was, going down to someone else's apartment complex, getting their tags, putting them on my car because my tags were expired. I don't know how early in sobriety, it may have lasted a little while, but, I was dying, and, what that treatment center did for me was bought me some time. It was an outpatient thing. They drop you off in the morning, and group therapy all day long, and some schoolwork and urinalysis, breathalyzer, and they send you home at 5 o'clock. You go to a meeting, you come back the next day, you do it all over again. It was a 6-month program. I zipped right through it in 13 months. It's true. The idea was you spend 6 months there, and the idea is to fix you and send you back to your school. And I remember when they called my school and they say, he's all fixed up, he's ready to go, we're going to send him back. And they're like, no, you keep him. And thank God they kept me, because I would have never gotten a diploma. I'm not quite sure if I ever got that diploma, but I wouldn't have stayed sober without some more forced sobriety time. And I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous right away. I knew I was in the right place from the very first day I got here. I knew I was with my people. I just, like I was talking about at the beginning, that language of the heart is you either know what it is or you don't. But at 17, 18, 19 years old, this is at least my experience. You can't convince somebody at 17 or 18 or 19 years old that what you need is a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. How do you know what that was? You say, you guys would say that stuff, but, I just need to get my life together. I just needed my own apartment. If I could just get her. If I could just make $15 an hour, I'd be okay. And in that AA club, the mantra was, don't drink, go to meetings, and help another alcoholic. That was fine. Kept me sober for a while. And did some step work as we went along and in that treatment center. And once they put me out in the world, I had no idea what this really AA thing was about. I thought it was just about going to meetings. I'd go to meetings and hopefully somebody would share something terrible that would make me feel a little bit better about myself, or somebody would give some incredibly motivational talk and that would make, my sobriety was precarious for an incredible amount of time. I was just a meeting makers make it guy, And if you've been here for a little while, you know that just making meetings is not what this program is about. 12 step does not say having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these meetings. It doesn't say that. But it took me some time to figure that out. And, I'd bounce from sponsor to sponsor, and they'd kind of push some step work on me, and they'd be like, oh, that's not for me. And, but we were really active. Taking meetings into the hospital when somebody is sick or somebody, and I got hooked up with a sponsor that was kind of like a two-stepper, just tried to kind of work 1 in 12, which we all know doesn't work, but he tried it for a long, long time, and, he stayed sober, but the quality of his life really wasn't something that I wanted. And I got hooked up with another sponsor, and his name was Charles, and he was my sponsor for about 10 years. And, I would call him with the crisis of the day. I'm 20 years old, I'm 22 years old, something like that. Like, God, my job sucks. I don't have any money. The wife wants to leave, and, I don't know what to do. I can't fix the car. I got no gas. I'm broke, just vomiting all over the phone. And he'd say, John, my experience is when I worked the steps out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, my life got better. I'd be like, yeah, no, I hear you, Charles, but I don't have any money, And so after a while, listening to my BS, he would just say, listen, I just hung up with Rick. Rick needs a ride to the meeting. Why don't you go pick him up? Take him to the meeting. I'm thinking, well, obviously you're not listening to me. I just told you my car doesn't run. I have no money. I have no gas, It said, just go pick up Rick. It'll be fine, And I did. but you don't stay here for an extended period of time without doing some work. And about 5 years of sobriety, my first wife rolled out, and that was obviously quite painful and caused me to do some step work. And she left on a Monday and did some step work, and Renee moved in on Wednesday. And it's been marital bliss ever since. I kind of just did step work as like the crises demanded. My third step was more like, God, you handle the alcohol and the drugs, and I'll handle the money and the women. Like that, it seemed to be a good allocation of the power distribution in my life. And it's still, super young, right? I mean, 23, 24, 25 years old, I didn't get that. I guess I was too dense. And I knew I had to work these steps, and I tried to do some of the steps kind of just as the crisis warranted. And so when she left, I did the best 4-step I could, and that got, wasn't exactly searching and fearless, but a little closer to shallow and cowardly, but that got me some good results. And, I rode that for a while. And then, I had to do some amends because, that stuff was catching up with you. And, you start like running out of the Home Depot because you go with that guy at the end, some money. It's time to start doing some amends. And, I was a coward with that stuff too. I didn't rush into all that. And, really what was keeping me was I had this sponsor that really knew me. And my old man was dying, and he kept telling me, look, you got to go to this amends with your father. I was like, look, they told me he's dying for the last 10 years, he'd be here forever. And I was just so afraid to do it. And I want to talk more about that tomorrow. But I didn't do it before he died. And, but when he did die, I did some amends, and, it was just kind of like a roller coaster of sobriety for a long time. And things got good. Renee and I got together, started making good money. AA life was awesome. It was like the book talks about, boy meets girl on AA campus and life just takes off. And it did for us. And I don't want to say like that I was a half measures guy, because I wasn't. I mean, I really felt like I was doing the deal, but like I just held back a little bit. Like I was not 100% all in the third step. It wasn't like, God, the full surrender. It just wasn't, because I knew if I fully surrendered to God, I wouldn't get what I want. If I didn't get what I want, then how could I possibly be happy? That was kind of in hindsight my reservations. But I didn't know that, when that's your attitude. And so life's going along really well, and I start getting some cash and prizes of sobriety, and I start chasing that stuff, and that's all fool's gold, as everybody in here knows. And, but I'm still chasing really hard, and, getting a little bit farther away from meetings because I bought this big business, and I'm a big shot now, and I gotta be there, work all the time. I gotta manage this process, and there was no third step involved at all in buying this business. It was all self-will and right. I overpromised, underdelivered. I was not qualified to own this business, but, I just had to have this business because then I'd be the big shot, and I could, I'm writing the checks, I'm calling the shots, I just thought that was the next progression, the step in my career. And I leveraged our home on it, and borrowed, $500,000 to do it, and just nonsense, just chasing fool's gold. And that took me farther and farther away from Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not working with any people, and a no service commitment, just getting to meetings every, meeting a week or maybe 2 meetings a week, doing some social AA stuff. But I'm sure people looked at me and kind of saw me drift away a little bit, but, maybe didn't say anything. I remember sitting in meetings and just dying inside, and be like, man, my life's crashing around me, and too scared to put my hand up, because if I put my hand up, then I got to get even more honest, or people would be like, look, that dude's not doing the deal. Well, of course I wasn't doing the deal, it wasn't a secret to anybody. And, not exactly in this time frame, and I always kind of mess up the order of things, but in a 1 year period of time, from like 17 years of sobriety to 18 years of sobriety, I completely just train wrecked my life. In that year, that business that I bought went bankrupt, was repossessed by the guy I bought it from. Our house was in foreclosure. My cars were repossessed. The lights were getting turned off all the time. You got like 8, 10, 11-year-old kids, you're at Walmart buying lanterns, and they're like, oh, our lights are off, and you're like trying to be cool in front of the cashier, be like, oh yeah, we're camping, like just life completely unmanageable, just IRS garnished our checking account like 3 times in a 1 year period of time. I got arrested in sobriety for not paying my speeding tickets. I was so full of fear. I had these 2 garbage bags, brown shopping bags full of bills. I just couldn't open them. I couldn't even look at them. Like I had this ability to like walk in my office and like just not even see it. It was just like, that peripheral vision that they put those, things on the horses. And that's what I had. I'm just dying inside, and I traded in one of the most valuable things I had, and that was the fidelity to my wife. I used to say in meetings all the time, I've done a lot wrong in recovery, but I've never picked up. I've never been unfaithful to my wife, and I traded that in. And our marriage was devastated, and she was devastated, and everything was just falling down on me. I mean, our life was a mess. It seemed like I couldn't go to AA where I got sober because I owed that guy all that money for buying the business, and I couldn't go to meetings where we lived because Renee sponsors half the city, and all the women hated me, and I'd walk in and they'd give me those laser beams. There's the guy that Of course, none of that happened, but that and here it happened. And so I'm just dying inside, and I fell off this ladder from like 16 feet, and I broke my arm at 90 degrees and broke my pelvis in 3 places, and just full of so much self-pity. I mean, I'm stuck in this lazy boy chair for like 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, and thank God Renee was there and handled the medication. God knows what would have happened, but I'm just dying inside. I don't know how else to describe it. And she's, because she upheld her vows, and I devastated, everything that she thought was true in our life, and she'd had what seemed to me like it'd be a nervous breakdown and what it was, but she was having a terrible time. And she'll talk about that later. I don't want to even describe that. But one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm on the kitchen floor and I'm just done. I'm like, do I use a rifle or do I use a shotgun? Because I cannot feel like this any longer. AA clearly doesn't work. Look at my life. I'm 18 years sober. The lights are gonna be off again tomorrow. I don't have a job anymore. They repossessed this business, just pathetic. And I had a moment of clarity. It was, I don't know if it was it sounded a lot like my first sponsor in the back of my head. Like, dummy, like, you haven't done AA for a long time. I was like, man, all right, I'm going to give this AA deal everything I got. Like, I'm going to do that stuff they talk about in the book. Like, I'm going to follow all these directions. I'm going to give it the best I got. I don't remember putting a time frame on it, but I was like, I'm going to do this AA thing 1,000%. I'm going to be just a superstar, rock star AA member. And if it doesn't work, then I'm going to blow my brains out. And like every day for about 6 months, that was a huge struggle for me. It was like, because even though I had this great big surrender, I didn't do much. I surrendered, but I hadn't followed up with much action. And finally, this girl this woman that Renee sponsored had given me this 4-step talk. And I had to borrow someone else's car to drive an hour to work to a concern similar to the one I once owned, if anybody reads the book. And I'm just still full of, I've had this awesome surrender, right? But I'm still full of so much self-pity and depression. And every decision I make is bad. Every decision. Because it's based on self. And I'm listening to this 4-step talk, and I was like, holy moly, this guy's just like, what's he talking about? I pulled over, I opened the book, I'm like thinking he's doing this like from the 5th edition or something. Because the instructions he described in the book was clearly not what I had done. It wasn't anything like the 4-step I had done. I said, holy moly, I got to contact this guy. And the talk was like 10 years old, and I'm a deal maker. And so I say, all right, God, I'm going to call this guy. His name was Scott Lee. He identified himself with first name, last name, redneck from Nashville, Tennessee. And so I get to the office, I say, well, I'm already backing out on this deal. I'm like, look, that's a redneck name, it's a redneck state. There's going to be 500 Scott Lees, right? How many Lees in Nashville are there going to be? Millions. So I go into whitepages.com, Scott Lee, Nashville, Tennessee. One name comes up. Like when you sense God's presence in your life, like, pushing the old button, like, all right, here we go. So I say, all right, God, I'm going to call this guy. I put his name on a Post-it note. I put it on the dashboard of this guy's car that I'm borrowing. No need to rush into this. And so I'm driving around for a couple of days. This, Post-it notes on the dash, it's falling down all the time. The kids are like, Daddy, why don't you put this number in your phone? I'm like, oh, no, not sure I need it, I'm still holding on. So finally I called this guy up at, 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning on the way to work. I just vomited all over the phone. emotionally. I'm just, my life's a mess. I said to him, will you please do the 4-step with me the way you described in that talk you gave? This is exactly what he said. He said, I don't know if God that you understand, the God that you believe in, but I just got off my knees this morning. I was asking God, somebody to send me somebody to help today, and I guess you're it. And I said, I'm all in. I'll do whatever you say. And he goes, but I'm not going to do the 4-step with you. I'm thinking, here we go, these communication problems with sponsors again. Like, I thought we had something going here for a second, but I clearly told you what the problem was. I told you what the solution was. So why don't we get to it, right? That's how the sponsorship-sponsee relationship works. He said, I got half a notion that the reason why you're in the spot that you're in is you've been working kind of an a la carte program, kind of cafeteria style. Take what you want, leave the rest. Does not work at Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, if you want to do the whole deal, if you want to start at the beginning of that book and read it and follow the instructions, when it says stop and pray, we'll stop and pray together. When it says stop and make a list, we'll stop and make a list together. When it says stop and consider, we'll stop, etc. If you're willing to do that, I'm all in. I said, let's do it. And I don't need to tell you guys that as a result of working the steps that way, I've had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps that has just transformed my life in a way that is indescribable and really the lives of many men. Because that's how I sponsor guys now, right? When I think about that experience now, 8, 9 years later, I can see God's fingerprints just all over it. I really believe that these 12 steps are just divinely designed, each one of them, to remove what's blocking me from God. That's it, right? They all have a little special key that removes that special thing that's one more, as they say, layer the onion, one more thing that's blocking you from God. One of my favorite analogies is I use it a lot. My sponsor has this guided meditation he does of kind of an umbilical cord from God to him, kind of like how that power flows. And I really like that. And when Renee was having our second child, she was in the delivery room, and you all know what that looks like, right? All the stickers and the wires everywhere. It's, a little bit like a video game. And, the baby's heartbeat's being monitored. And at some point, the baby's heartbeat flatlines. And when that happens in the delivery room, exciting things happen. This team comes rushing in, and, they're trying to figure out what's going on. And was it the monitor? Was it the sensor? And they're getting ready to do a crash C-section on my wife. And this old school delivery nurse comes in. She goes, hold on, not yet, doc, not yet. And she has my wife roll over a little bit. She says, get on all fours. And she puts a hand out, put your foot out. It's like pregnant twister. And after a long minute, probably 10 seconds, but it seemed like an hour, the baby's heartbeat came back. An hour or two later, baby was born fine. Everything's perfect. Beautiful girl. Life's beautiful. But a little while later, hour later, we grabbed that delivery nurse and we're like, what in the hell happened in there? And she said, sometimes the baby gets so scared before they come out, they grab that umbilical cord and they squeeze it so hard that they stop their own blood flow. And that's exactly what I do with the God of my understanding, with this umbilical cord from God to me. I do it all. I still do it today. Having been through the 12 steps and having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps doesn't mean that self doesn't come back, doesn't mean these character defects don't come back. I can squeeze it on the way home tonight, this life has afforded us and me so many blessings. I can't begin to describe them, but this last one I want to describe is just the transformation that's happened in this last year. Renee's mom got sick this time last year. Renee rushed down to Myrtle Beach and brought her home, and her mother and I did not get along very well. Typical mother-son-in-law type of relationship. So much so that she lived in Myrtle Beach. And I used to go there 2 or 3 times a year and play 8 rounds of golf in 4 days. And every time I came back, the kids would say, hey, did you stop at we called her Grandma Millie's house? And I said, no, I didn't stop. And, kids buy that for a while, but after a little while, they kind of want to know what's going on, and, hey, did you go? No, I didn't go. So one time I finally decided I'm going to just tell them the truth. I say, hey, listen, if I was on fire next to your grandmother's pool, I wouldn't jump in it. Okay, that's how that relationship works. I said that to the kids. That explained it to them. So when you get to talk from the podium a lot, we've always had the philosophy that everything in our life is God's, right? Our house is God's, the cars are God's, everything is God's. And that's been just proven to us so many times. Like when we went through that crisis, like, I'm not embarrassed to tell you, we went, I think, 2.5 years without making a mortgage payment, and we got to keep our home. And we just gave it to God. I mean, it was filled with newcomers all the time, newcomer in the basement, big book study. We said, well, we're just going to stay here until they tell us to go. And they never told us to go. And then eventually we got a deal worked out with the bank. We got to stay. But you start talking about everything's God's from the podium. God will take you up on that. It sounds good, right? But like He will take you up on that. And I was going through the steps with our friend Harold last summer, and there's a girl I work with that borrowed some money, didn't pay me back, and I'm livid. You know how we do, right? And there's one day at work, she's a single mom, struggling, paycheck to paycheck to paycheck. And I'm sending her this toxic text. I'm like, how dare you? You're stealing from me. You're taking food out of my kids' mouths, and like, my kids eat, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're getting ready to go on a vacation to Florida, and I'm blowing her up. I didn't send it, thank God. And this voice I heard right before I sent, I don't hear voices like that, but like, what came to me right before I sent that text is if everything is really God's, she can't steal from you, right? It's not mine. And I didn't send that text, and I reached out to her, and things were fine. But a couple months later, I share that experience from, talking a lot in AA, and everything's God's, everything's God's. And so Renee goes to go get her mom. It's clear her mom's not going back to South Carolina. Her health is going down. And Renee says, hey, I'm going to bring my mom back to the house to live with us. And, usually my reaction would be, my house? But, as a result of these steps, that didn't happen. It was absolutely, bring her home. Because that transformation had happened within me. It wasn't my house. It wasn't even her house. It was God's house, and I got to watch this incredible experience, and she'll describe it better than I do, but watching Renee take care of her mom for the last 3 months of her life, 4 months of her life at our house this summer, it's just incredible, and I didn't get to sit down with her and have this heart to heart, but the resentment was long gone. And I got to cook for her and make her bring her orange juice in the morning. And the last meal she had was this salmon meal I had made, and she just loved it to death. And the day before she died, she told me she loved me. And I told her I loved her, and I meant it to my core. It was no longer this person that was threatening me. I was no longer affected by it. And it wasn't even because of the condition that she was in. I didn't even think she was dying. I thought she'd still be here. I told her she's not leaving. So the growth doesn't end in Alcoholics Anonymous when you get, X amount of years. Everybody thinks, oh, if I could just get to 5 years, 10 years, or if I just get this in my life, everything will be perfect. There is no if only in Alcoholics Anonymous. There are no merit badges in Alcoholics Anonymous. There are no experts in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just, it's a one day at a time deal. And I'm so grateful to be here. I'm really excited about the weekend. And what I'm excited about is getting to know you guys. There are these people in Alcoholics Anonymous who, when you go hear them talk or you go to a weekend with them, you're going to leave with this like insightful nugget that you would not have heard anywhere else, right? You go listen to Bob B., you're going to leave with something that's like is going to change your life. Sandy Beach was that way, or Bob Darrell or Howard Polans. That's not what you're in for there this weekend. Okay, like we just are satisfied customers of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the spiritual awakening that I've had as a result of these steps demands that I share that with you, and I love doing that. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and I'll shut up and turn the meeting back over. Thanks.